Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Lucian Alziari. Lucian is the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer of Prudential Financial, a Fortune 50 financial services company. Prior to Prudential, Lucian was the CHRO of A.P. Moller Maersk, a global shipping and energy conglomerate with about 90,000 employees and operations in over 130 countries worldwide. Prior to that, he was the CHRO of Avon Products, and he formerly served on the board of directors of Clarks, a UK-based global footwear company, and was the chair of the Center for Executive Succession. Lucian is also a fellow of the National Academy of Human Resources. Lucian, as always, it is a tremendous treat for me to get you down here and certainly for our students, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
So, Lucian, and I just heard you speaking to the students about Gen AI at the end and artificial intelligence more broadly, and you've been, I wouldn't call it a skeptic, but you've been thoughtful, very thoughtful about what it means, even in the face of tsunami of interest and enthusiasm for it. Can you share a little bit about where the journey has brought you in terms of thinking about Gen AI and artificial intelligence in terms of how we compete in business?
Yeah, it's been an interesting chapter for me. I always try and figure out, well, what truly matters and how much does something really matter? And, as you say, when Gen AI, it literally kind of exploded into our world. Clearly lots of enormous potential, a lot of hype, very kind of polarized views. It was either going to be joy to the world, it takes away all of the drudge work, we will do work that we love to do, or the end of the world, the end of the professional roles in society. And you know enough from your own experience to say, well, it's probably not going to be either of those. And there are some broader societal questions around, what it's used for that I think other parts of society and government really do need to look at. But my perspective is always trying to figure out, well, what matters, how much does it matter, and then how do I apply that to my day job, which is how do I help Prudential win? And so I've been on my own kind of journey of exploration, getting multiple touch points, a few inside the company, but mostly West Coast companies, lots of meetings with peers, meeting chief information officers, reading a lot, trying a lot. And coming back to what does it mean for the enterprise? What does it mean for my function that I lead? And then what does it mean for me as a leader? And my big aha moment after literally 15 or 20 of these meetings was we're asking the wrong question, because all of these meetings were about how do we deploy Gen AI? And the right question is back to the sort of fundamental role, how do I help my company win? And then in that context, what does this new technology open up for us in terms of potential competitiveness for the company?
So that's really interesting, because that means it's going to truly mean different things for each company.
Absolutely.
Or ought to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So given that, do you have ways that you think that HR leaders ought to be thinking about it in beyond maybe even more within the HR function, but beyond how is this really going to fit with our winning? Or is that the only question that people should be asking, and then the rest follows, and I should retract my question?
Well, I think winning is kind of the Uber question, but you win through sometimes being more productive, and then you win through doing new things and doing those distinctively well. So an example of both, there are clearly implications for how work gets done that Gen AI, and actually particularly AI, traditional artificial intelligence, can be enormously helpful for. So we have an obligation always to be thinking about, is our organization as productive as it needs to be? We shouldn't be doing things expensively if we can do them much more productively. So everybody needs to have an eye to that. The other side of it is, what does it enable us to do that previously we weren't able to do? And one example for me is in the area of coaching for the organization as a whole. So coaching has typically been kind of people constrained. You can only afford so many really good individual coaches, and so it tends to be contained to a relatively few people within the company where you're making judgments about the highest payoff for the company. With AI and Gen AI in this case, now we can do something that we couldn't do before, which is we can apply technology with coaching tools that can actually reach everybody in the company. And that to me is kind of the exciting stuff, is what can we now do that we weren't ever able to do?
And for something like that, like the coaching to everybody, does that mean that because of this, we can really be tailoring it to each individual where they are in the organization to help them get that coaching?
We can be offering it to every individual in the company, and then their conversation with the coach, because it will look and feel like a coach to them, except it's going to be delivered by technology. But their conversation is going to be very much about them, where they are, and helping them grow and develop as they define it.
Switching to talking about the board of directors. So it seems from an outside perspective that CHROs are having more conversation both about and with directors. And from the directors we talked to at CES, CHROs can be a tremendous value. What do you see as the CHRO's relationship with the board of directors?
My experience has been it's very different company to company, and there isn't really an obvious logic that defines the difference from one to the other. So it tends to be very situational. In some companies, the chief HR officer is right at the center of board member recruitment, selection. In other companies, that's owned by others, typically the secretary or the general counsel. What I have found in my own experience is it depends on what the hot topics for the company are. So anytime the company is in, for example, a succession chapter, you will be working very, very closely with the board because that's their biggest decision, and they expect us to run a very, very good process, which hopefully we do, very much enabled by the Center for Executive Succession over the years, I should say. The other thing then is boards, I think, are much more aware now of the external context within which their companies are looking to operate. And many of those external contextual issues are ones where they have implications for talent, the voice of employees, societal issues, tensions externally that could come in and disrupt your culture internally. So I think those issues have tended to sort of migrate much more towards areas where hopefully the expertise of the CHRO can be helpful to the board.
And related to that, one of the things we've seen often and talked about is that the HR function is not as strong as some other functions in terms of internal promotion, in terms of succession planning. At least that's part of the narrative out there. And a lot of the explanation for that has often been about lack of experience for those people below the CHRO level with the board. And we often hear from CHROs that one of the biggest kind of surprises or unique things about becoming a CHRO was interacting with the board in maybe in unexpected ways or hadn't fully appreciated. Are there things that we can be doing in the field to help those that are not yet at the CHRO get more of that exposure to boards or learn more about what it's like to be able to succeed in those places?
Yeah, I would say those two pieces are both important. I don't necessarily see one impacting the other. So the reason that CHROs don't develop successors effectively, I don't think has much to do with whether those folks are ready to deal with the board. It has a lot to do with how seriously they're taking their accountabilities for succession in their own functions. So I can tell you that there's no job that I will be in where I am not leaving behind a stable of very, very qualified successors. I think that's a choice that each of us has to make. Boards are tough to prepare for, so you can help your potential successors get exposure through committee meetings. The comp committee, the human capital committee are obvious places to play, but it's still, those are kind of the set piece presentations, and that's a small part of what distinguishes whether you're effective or not effective when it gets to the really sensitive, nuanced stuff with the board. And unfortunately, there isn't that much you can do to prepare for that. Having said that, if you are highly effective with CEOs and with executive team colleagues, those skills are directly transferable into how you would deal with boards, as long as you remember the context within which the board operates and you have a picture of where it fits within the overall sort of corporation and corporate governance.
And so what are some of those skills that really help? Even if we just think about with the CEO or executive leadership team, what are the things that really help the CHRO strengthen that or have a really strong relationship with in those places?
Personal credibility, you know what you're doing, trust, high integrity, very good judgment, ability to listen, ability to figure out what truly matters, what's really important, and to focus on that. And I think increasingly the ability to help teams and boards come to alignment themselves. Board members do not all come to issues with an aligned point of view on day one, as is the same with executive teams. So the skill sets that you develop through being hopefully a very effective HR leader, a lot of them are directly transferable.
And switching again to thinking about working remotely in place. You were one of the very early leaders that I ever heard talk about just saying, this is what it's going to be for the future. We're going to have to have the flexibility to encourage workers to be their most productive from other locations. Has that changed or evolved in recent years? Is it getting any more narrow in terms of how you think about that, or what you would put in place that you think needs to be in place for people to really succeed?
My view hasn't changed, but my view has always been it's not going to be 100% in the office or 100% remote. And I think some of these debates, they go to the extremes really, really quickly, because that's where the interesting article can be written, right? So the answer is always somewhere between those two extremes. The one thing I would say is my answer is informed by the way in which my company does business, our business model, our operating model. And our particular business model lends itself to a hybrid work environment where there's a mix of flexibility for the employee and then being in the office for a certain part of their work. If I was in another company where 90% of our colleagues were frontline who had to be there 100% of the time, I'd have a very different point of view about what you do with the headquarters population. So I would say always start with your own company and what's going to help that company win and be effective. But I still think it's a winning combination between enough time with colleagues in a way that supports innovation, builds culture, all of the things that I think people have kind of rightfully identified. But that is not 100% of the time. And I can tell you, in the talent attraction piece of our role, that flexibility is really important to top talent as much as it is to anybody.
And how about the talent attraction, that's really critical.
Yep.
How about, have you seen any, or is there anything raising any concerns in terms of the remote workplace and talent development, particularly leadership development? Because that's often what we hear as one of the real worries, that people won't learn through as many interactions, or that those that are more remote will be overlooked more often, which could have challenges for some people.
They're good questions. But again, I think most of us are settling in some form of hybrid. So pre-pandemic, 20% of our roles were remote. Post-pandemic, 20% of our roles are remote. The biggest change has been the other 80% that used to be full-time in office. Now, I would say 75% of the 80, so 75 out of the 80 are now in some form of hybrid. So we say 2 days a week on average, 3 days a week if you're a leader, because you need to lead the people and build the culture. I think that is a perfectly workable combination. And if you can't build culture, create team cohesiveness, create innovation in 3 days, you're probably not going to be able to do it in 5 days.
And as a CHRO, and you in particular often talk about winning and that's really thinking about the business. Mm-hmm. What do you see as some of the big challenges that might be people related over the next few years for major organizations?
Yeah, I think each of us needs to come back to our own business. What does winning mean in our particular environment? And so I think that will be different business to business, certainly industry to industry. Having said that, I think there will be some themes that probably span, and to me it's sort of the context within which we play has changed, I think. So I think we need to be much more aware of the overall sort of political, social, geopolitical environment within which we play, because that's clearly, it impacts our business and it's really important to our employees. The whole issue of employee voice, what do companies speak out about, what do companies not speak out about, how do we feel about the approach we should take with incorporating technology into work. All of those issues, diversity and inclusion, I think will continue to be an important talent issue for companies as we go forward. That's always been the case. I think that you exist in an environment, you need to be aware of the outside environment, but at the end of the day, our job is to say, well, what does that mean for my company, and how do I use those trends to help our company be more effective?
And one of the questions that the students asked you, I'll phrase it a little differently, is where are places that you see companies coming up a little short of what their potential might be in terms of helping them win from a HR perspective?
Well, I don't think my role is to sort of criticize others. I can tell you the things that I think will help companies win are having a very business-defined definition of talent. All right, talent is not generic; it's defined by your business. A willingness to make choices about where is good enough, where do you need to be world class, and to differentiate between employees based upon their contribution to the company, your ability to access a broad range of talent that really understands the markets within which you play, and the ability to really find this kind of sweet spot between the company's purpose and the purpose of the individuals that come to the company, and making sure that there is very good alignment between those. And then you come back to, the wonderful truths of what we do in HR, which is if you treat people well, they tend to perform really well. And when people perform really well, companies win. And that's why I've spent a lifetime doing what I do.
And relatedly, you've often talked about where you need to be great versus where good is good enough. I thought you gave a really interesting answer to the questions today when they asked about what separates great from good enough, and knowing that it's business specific. But can you elaborate a little bit on what that distinction is, maybe particularly within the HR function for you?
Yeah, I think at two levels. One way to understand for your company as a whole, where do you need to be world class and where is good enough, is just listen to your CEO meeting a customer, telling that customer why they should choose his or her company. They tend to talk about choose us because of 2 or 3 things. that's a really good clue to where do you need to be world-class, because that's the CEO saying, these are the things that provide real competitive differentiation. Here's why you should choose us. In terms of HR, then you come back to, well, against that picture of what makes the company as a whole win, where do you need to be truly world-class? So in my business, we need to be world-class in talent. All right, all bets are off in certain aspects of our company, and we get pretty forensic about which roles make the biggest difference. In those roles, we need absolutely world-class. In many other roles, we need very good people, not average. We need very good people, but we don't need to have the world's best. All right, and making those choices and helping employees understand that we're making those choices. And we never use the word average because we have high standards as a company. But there are some roles that make a bigger difference to the company. And the other thing that comes along with that, in those roles, expectations are higher.
And relatedly, because the students always ask, and I think you shared with our students today, but for those that don't get to see you in person, what are the skills that you're really looking for in new HR professionals? And then what is it that they have that would allow them to stay working for you and to continue growing?
I think let's start with a CEO perspective on HR, right? If you ask the world's best CEOs, what's the thing that they most treasure about some of the CHROs that they've worked with and what distinguishes them versus everybody else? My guess is they're not going to talk about HR stuff. They're going to talk about this person was a real business leader, right? And so let's start with that as the important outcome. When you're entering the team, then curiosity about business, right? Interest in business, seeing yourself principally as I'm a business person who happens to practice HR, but my whole orientation is around how do I understand how this company wins to begin with, and then how do I contribute to that? But you can't replace curiosity. It's like the engine for me of people who ask questions that start with why rather than how. That's a pretty good indicator. The respect with which you work with colleagues. Don't take yourself too seriously. Willingness to do new things and not repeat experiences, but to try and because we're going to be offering you new experiences. The recognition, I think, that whatever skills, whatever functional skills you have at one point in time, within 3 years, 50% of them are going to need to be reskilled. All right, and so you come back to, well, what are the enduring skills? They are ability to learn, curiosity, self-awareness, people skills. Those you can carry with you for a long, long time.
We are deeply appreciative for all of your engagement with us and look forward to helping us for another 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just listened to another CHRO Conversation. Today, Lucien Alziari of Prudential Financial shared his views about how HR drives business success. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.